Okay. So we're beginning with our sponsor for today, Peter and Catherine Altbaum. B'schus refuah shlema for Ephraim ben Shifra. He should have a complete refuah shlema. What we ended off with yesterday, and it seems like less than 12 hours ago. So we had begun a brisa that we're going to continue on dealing with today. The question that we wanted to know was whether or not you can delay the year by adding an extra month, whether you could push off in order to delay so that you can have everybody be tahor by the time it was time to do the Korban Pesach. So we had a machlokas in the Mishnah. The Mishnah started off with the Rabbanan's opinion that says that we do not push off, we do not add an extra month in order to push off Pesach so that we can have a Korban Pesach with everybody being tahor. And Rabbi Yehuda says that we do. And then, in seeming contradiction to his own words, Rabbi Yehuda then tells us the story of Chizkiah, who is the king of Yehuda, and he did exactly this. He pushed off. Everybody was cleaning out all the idols, and he pushed off Pesach by an extra month by adding another month into the year, and he regretted it. Right, and he started davening on his behalf. Now that's where we're going to say Rabbi Yehuda is questionable. Exactly, we're going to discuss this today. What is Rabbi Yehuda really holding? Because Rabbi Yehuda says that we do push off, and then now he's saying that they had to ask forgiveness for such a thing. So that's where we are on top of Yud Beis Amud Beis. So Chizkiah had davened, and he wanted to be able to get some sort of a kapara for the fact that he had done this, had delayed the Korban Pesach. Rabbi Shimon says, Rabbi Shimon says, if they did in fact do this push off the year, then it would work. Now, that sounds exactly like the Tanna Kama, right? The Tanna Kama started off, the first opinion said that if you add an extra month, it works. Rabbi Yehuda said it doesn't. Comes Rabbi Shimon and says, yes, it does. So why do we need Rabbi Shimon's opinion if he agrees already with a previously stated opinion? We're going to ask that question. So then the question is, if he had every right to do it, then the question is, why did he have to daven? What was the reason? What was the rationale why he had to daven and ask for forgiveness? The answer is, She'ein ma'avrin ela adar vehu iber Nisan. It was a technical mistake that he made. We said that we don't push off, we don't add an extra month unless it's adar. And what happened was that Chizkiah did this. It was already Nisan. They already had gotten into Nisan, and then he said, you know what? This is not Nisan, this is really Adar, and he changed Nisan into Adar after Nisan had already started. That you're not supposed to do, and that could create problems, right? So he Iber Nisan ben Nisan. Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda, Omer Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda said, Mishum Rabbi Shimon, Mipnei Shehesi es Yisrael lasos Pesach Sheni. He says it has nothing to do. They didn't make an extra month at all. Right? He says that wasn't what was going on in this pasuk. What happened in this pasuk is there was a number of people who were impure, and he told them what Brian was suggesting yesterday. Let's all go do the Korban Pesach Sheni. Let's not do it now. Let's do the Pesach Sheni. That's what he told them to do. Now, that is not the halacha, because the Pesach Sheni is only supposed to be brought if an individual is tamei, not if the community is tamei. If the community is tamei, everybody should do it at the right time, not delay. So therefore, the mistake that he made was he delayed everybody and told everybody to go do the Pesach Sheni. And we're going to explain why he would have made that error. What was the mistake? And
they have to give, and once they give the korban, did they take away their tummy, or they're still tummy?
No, they're still tamei, right? This is until they get sprinkled with the ashes of the paraduma or whatever it is that they need, or go to the mikvah, whichever they need in order to become tahor, right? The fact that they are now able to bring the korban doesn't remove the tuma. We're just suggesting that since it's a community offering, we don't have to worry about the tuma at all. We're just going to ignore it for the time being. Baruch atah
Amen.
Amar Mar. Mar says, Rabbi Yehuda Omer. So let's go to Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Now we're going to go through this Mishnah one opinion at a time and figure out exactly what each of them is saying. Rabbi Yehuda, we had first had the Tanna Kama, and the Tanna Kama said the Tanna Kama said that we don't add an extra month. Rabbi Yehuda came along and he said, Ma'abrin. Rabbi Yehuda says that you do make an extra month. So now, Alma Islay Rabbi Yehuda Tuma Dechuya Hi Betzibur. That means that Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that as we discussed yesterday, that it's not just that it's permissible to bring a korban pesach or any other community offering when people are tamei. It actually means that when everybody is tamei, we completely ignore all the laws of tumah. It's not an issue. You don't have to do anything in order to make it better that everybody should be tahor. Ideally, if most of the people are tahor, then the people who are bringing it have to be tahor. But if most of the people are not, then that's just the way that it is. And this year we're going to do it with the korban pesach, and people are not going to be tahor. And that's the way that it is. So it's not a problem. So he says it's actually not a problem. But the question is, v'hatanya. We have a brisa which shows Rabbi Yehuda's opinion not like that. And that is that tzitz, when it comes to the Kohanim's begadim, each one has a special purpose. There's a tzitz, which was a gold plate that went across his forehead, and it said Kodesh LaHashem written across the top. What was the purpose of that piece? The purpose of that piece is if you had a sacrifice that was impure accidentally, the sacrifice would still be acceptable. Okay, so that is the purpose of that piece.
No, the question represented the 12 tribes.
Right, and also there was the Urim V'Tumim in the Choshen. You could ask it questions, and it would be able to give you answers. But this tzitz was the goal of the tzitz was to validate sacrifices that otherwise would have been invalid because of their impurity. Now, tzitz bein sheyeshno al mitzcho bein she'eno al mitzcho meratzeh. Divrei Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon says that tzitz, once it's part of the clothing of the Kohen Gadol, it doesn't matter whether the Kohen happened to be wearing the tzitz at the moment that this korban that was not pure was brought. The fact that the tzitz exists makes it so that the sacrifice is valid. So it could be that the Kohen wasn't there that day, right? He wasn't wearing it that day, right? And the sacrifice is brought. Nevertheless, the tzitz, according to Rabbi Shimon, the tzitz helps it regardless. Rabbi Yehuda says, Odo al mitzcho meratzeh, he says, not so. It has to be being worn by the Kohen at the time, otherwise it's ineffective.
It has to. Then it's not effective.
Sorry?
If the Kohen has a day off, then it's not effective. That's
correct. The Kohen's not wearing it. It's not. We're going to see. Even if he doesn't have a day off, there could be a circumstance where the Kohen's not wearing it. But if it's on his head, so then it works. Ein odo al mitzcho. But if it's not on his head, eino meratzeh, then it does not work. Amar le Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon says, Kohen Gadol b'Yom HaKippurim yochiach. I'll show you a time when the Kohen Gadol is doing service and he's not wearing the tzitz. And if a sacrifice is brought and it's in a state of impurity, it's still valid. What's that? On Yom Kippur. Let's say it's Yom Kippur. The Kohen Gadol removes his regular 8 garments that he wears all the time, and he does service in the linen begadim, the white begadim that he wears specially for Yom Kippur.
If he's not wearing it, then how is it still valid? So
that's the question. As Rabbi Shimon says, it still works. The existence of the tzitz is what matters, not whether the Kohen's wearing it. And he says, this is the proof. It's the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur removes his 8 garments, amongst them that he removes is the tzitz, and then he goes and performs the Yom Kippur service, parts of it at least, two sections of the day, wearing these white begadim, these white garments.
When he's coming?
So the question isn't necessarily when he's tummy, yes, but also if the tzibor is tummy. Now, so if he's not wearing it, she'eno al mitzcho, it's not on his head, umeratzeh, and if there's a tuma problem if there's a tuma problem with the sacrifice that he's bringing, even though he's not wearing the tzitz on his head, the sacrifice is still valid.
When we're talking about the community being impure, that doesn't include the Kohanim, does it?
It could include the Kohanim, yes.
The Kohen Gadol could do a service and be
yes.
impure? But isn't that what we're waiting for the red heifer?
Yes.
But he
So we're fine without it too?
So
he's going to go to the kosher kedoshim when he's impure, right?
Can he go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim without being pure? The answer is we'll get to Yuma. The answer is no. I should clarify that, right? On Yom Kippur, part of the service of Yom Kippur is they took him aside and they sprinkled the ashes of the paraduma before the Yom Kippur service for him to be able to make sure that he is pure on Yom Kippur for this service. But generally speaking, let's say, for example, when we're doing the Korban Pesach, it seems that if other Kohanim were impure, were in status of impurity, I think they could still do the service. Now, I'm going to say that, but I'm going to double check that. So this way, when I'm recording, I'm going to double check that because
a quarter is fine.
But the issue is being impure, depending on what type of impurity you have, and being in the Beis Hamikdash may be a problem. So that's what's hitting me and going. That might be a separate issue. So therefore, I'm going to hedge my bets here and suppose that yes, you're probably right that the Kohanim, if they are impure, that might be a problem with them being in the Beis Hamikdash and doing the service. So you're probably right. But I'm going to double check
Because
it.
they don't allow us to walk around the temple, right?
Correct.
Because of that.
That is correct. Right. So that is correct. So I'll hedge my bets. I'm going to take that back and say, no, if the Kohanim themselves are Tamei, they probably can't be in the Beis Hamikdash in the first place. But we're talking about the people on behalf of whom they are doing the service for, they can be Tamei, right? And they can eat the Korban Pesach despite the fact that they are Tamei, which is generally otherwise what you're trying to avoid. The Torah seems to say that we're trying to purify ourselves before Pesach. But
otherwise it would be like forbidden to eat it.
that's right. But we are learning that once the most of the nation is considered to be impure, so then the Korban Pesach can be brought in a status of impurity. Okay? So now, Amar lo Rabbi Yehuda, Hanach liyom, but I'm going to double check all this. I'll post to remind myself. I've gotten myself mixed up back and forth with a few things, so we'll post and clear this up. Okay. Amar lo Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says Hanach li Yom Kippurim shetuma hutra b'tzibur. Rabbi Yehuda says take Yom Kippur out of it. Yom Kippur, if the community is tamei, right, and this is all, we're not bringing any personal offerings on Yom Kippur. Everything, because nobody can eat any offerings. Everything that's being brought on Yom Kippur is a community offering. And we have this rule that once the community is impure, they can bring the offering. It has nothing to do with the tzitz.
And also, Yom Kippur is Yom Adin, which means no eating, nothing. Do we give an olah or what do we do?
Everything that's brought on Yom Kippur is not eaten. Everything is burned. Yeah. Right, even though they are chatas offerings that are brought, but nevertheless, those are also burned. There's nothing that's eaten. Correct. Ula tamech. Okay, so therefore he says, now according to you, tikshi lachi gufa. Now we've got a problem with Rabbi Yehuda himself. Rabbi Yehuda omer ma'avrin, right? Rabbi Yehuda himself, because now Rabbi Yehuda, we had said, so he says that we're going to push we're going to add an extra month. Why? Because we'd prefer them to be we'd prefer the people to be tummy. Now in this Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda says, no, don't worry about it. Tuma's fine, not an issue. And the fact that the coin's not wearing a tzitz is not a problem because it's a community offering, and we don't, once the community is impure, we don't worry about impurity. So which is it? Are we worried about impurity? And ideally we should be pure, or do we not care about it? So we've got a contradiction of Rabbi Yehuda. And this Rabbi Yehuda himself becomes a question. Rabbi Yehuda says, in this Mishnah itself, look at Rabbi Yehuda's own opinion. Rabbi Yehuda's own opinion is that it's okay to push the year off by a month in order to make sure everybody is tahor. And then, Rabbi Yehuda brings the story of Chizkiah Melech Yehuda. He brings the story of Chizkiah Melech Yehuda, She'iber Rosh Hashanah Mipnei Atuma, that he pushed off. He did exactly what Rabbi Yehuda said to do, right? Rabbi Yehuda says, go ahead, add an extra month, and then he brings the story. Chizkiah does it, and what happens? And then Chizkiah has to start davening and asking for forgiveness. Well, why? Why is he asking for forgiveness? He did exactly what Rabbi Yehuda said he was supposed to do. So what's going on here? Ella, so rather what it has to be is this brisa seems clearly to have some errors in it, and we're going to have to address this. Chisuri mechsera. There's going to be words missing from this brisa. V'hachi kitani. This is what the brisa really should say. Ein ma'avrin es hashana mipnei atuma. The Tana Kama starts off and says we don't push off the year because of the tuma problem. We're not going to add an extra month. Ve'imi brua meuberes. And if you did it, though, even though you're not supposed to, if they did it anyway, it would be effective. Then comes.
Would it be a sin though? It's effective.
No, it's effective. Well, no, it's not a sin if it's effective. It's not a good idea. It's not the right thing for us to do. Rabbi Yehuda says, Eina meuberes. Now we're saying Rabbi Yehuda holds the exact opposite of what we thought he held before. Rabbi Yehuda says very clearly, even if you did it, it does not work. Right? This does it because you're not supposed to do it. So therefore, if you do it for the wrong reasons, adding the extra year, if the calculation was mistaken, so adding the extra month, it doesn't happen. Then comes Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yehuda comes along and tells the story of Chizkiah. And what happened is that he added the extra month, which meant that everybody brought their Korban Pesach at the wrong time. Because they brought their Korban Pesach at the time when it wasn't really Pesach. Because the extra insertion was illegal. Now we understand why he had to daven on behalf of everybody for forgiveness.
Is there where we get the leap year from?
What do you mean? Is that where we get it from?
Because in the leap year we have 2 others, which is an extra month, right there.
So so we do have an extra month, and the question now we're asking is, do we add that for what reasons do we add it? Right? This tuma, according to Rabbi Yehuda, is not one of those reasons. According to Tanakama, it's not one of the reasons. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it is also, not only is it not one of the reasons, but even if you did it, it does not work. Okay, so he goes one step further. Now, if that's true, Rabbi Shimon Omer im mipnei atuma ibruha meuberes. So Rabbi Shimon says that if you did it, you're not supposed to, but if you did it, so then it would be valid. So Hainu Tanakama. Now we have our problem. Rabbi Shimon is holding the same thing as the Tanakama holds. At least the way we had understood the mission before was the Tanakama, that Rabbi Yehuda was saying that you can go ahead and do it, but Rabbi Shimon says that you can't do, that you shouldn't do it, but it works if you did it after the fact. So now he's holding the same thing. Amar Rava says L'chachila ika beinaihu. The difference is whether or not it's an ideal thing to do or not, right? The Tanakama are arguing on that point. The Tanakama says it's not ideal, right? That's not the reason to do it. But if they did it, it works. Rabbi Yehuda comes along and says it does not work. Rabbi Shimon says not only does it work, but that's an ideal thing to do. Go ahead. That is a perfectly fine thing to do. Of course, now we're going to have a problem. According to Rabbi Shimon, how does he understand what Chizkiah did wrong? If Chizkiah did exactly what Rabbi Shimon says that you're supposed to do, so that will be the next issue. So therefore, ihachi, where did I go? We said that one. Tanakh.
Is it Rabbi Shimon?
Yeah, Tuma Ibru Beres. Tanya Nami Hachi. We have a brisa that supports this as well. Ein ma'avrenes hashana mipnei atuma lechatchila. The brisa clearly spells this out. You're not supposed to, in an ideal world, you're not supposed to add the extra month in order to be able to give everybody a chance to become tahor. Rabbi Shimon Omer ma'abrin, and Rabbi Shimon does in fact say that you can do that. It's not a problem. Well, then we have the next problem. So let's go back to Chizkiah then. So Chizkiah added this extra month in, and then he goes and davens after the fact and says, whoops, I shouldn't have done that. Why not? According to you, Rabbi Shimon, that is exactly what you're supposed to do.
Would that cause another contradiction? Or is another contradiction?
Is what a contradiction?
No, wouldn't that cause another contradiction? Because some people say yes, some people say no.
So the contradiction is between two explanations of Rabbi Shimon, right? Rabbi Shimon, one place says you can go ahead and do it, and now we have to understand, well, it's not a question, two questions between Rabbi Shimon, it's Rabbi Shimon and the Psukim in Chizkiah, the Psukim in Malachim, that tells what Chizkiah was doing, right? Why is it that there's a problem? So She'ein ma'avrin ela odar. So the answer is, what the mistake that Chizkiah made was that he only supposed to add an extra odar. Vehu iber nisan benisan. His mistake wasn't the fact that he was supposed to add an extra month that he could have done. It was the technicality of when he added that extra month. That's what Rabbi Shimon says the problem is. The problem is that he waited until it was already Nisan. It was too late to add the extra month, and he did it anyway. And he turned Nisan into Adar Sheni, and that was he wasn't supposed to do. So Amar Mar, as we said, Mar said, She'ein me'avrin ela adar, vehu iber nisan benisan. He wasn't supposed to, he's only supposed to add an extra adar while he's still in adar. That's the deadline for the calculation to add an extra month is adar, and he waited until Nisan, because I guess that's when he realized that people are not going to be ready, and then he switched Nisan to adar, and that was not supposed to do. Now, v'leis le lechizkiah hachodesh lo zeh lachem, Zen Nisan vein acher Nisan. But 1 second, how did Chizkiah make such a simple mistake? Does he not read the pasuk? The pasuk says, "This month shall be chodesh," which means this month is Nisan. Vein acher Nisan. There's no second Nisan. So what does that mean? I guess the Gemara is initially presuming that what he did was he got to Nisan and said, "You know what? We need a second Nisan." And then he made Nisan Aleph and Nisan Beis. So how could he do that? So the answer is no. The mistake, what he did was he made a mistake, even though the Rashi explains HaChodesh Hazel Lachem, that you're supposed to, you're not supposed to switch Nisan to Adar. Once you get to Nisan, you can't flip it over and make it Adar. So how does he make this mistake? So the answer is Ta'abid Shmuel. He made a mistake in what Shmuel said. It was a little bit more subtle, the mistake. The Omar Shmuel says, Ein ma'avrenes hashana b'yom shloshim shel Adar. The answer is, what if you're on the 30th day of Adar, right? Adar can be 29 days. The 30th day might be Rosh Chodesh Nisan, might be the first day of Nisan. It could also be the 30th day of Adar. That day is still Adar technically until you declare it to be Nisan. The question is, can you make an extra month on that 30th day of Adar?
You
That's the
cannot.
question. So, Hoel Veroi Lekovo Nisan. So Shmuel says you cannot. Why? Because since that 30th of Adar could be the first day of Nisan, it already falls into the prohibition of adding an extra month once you get into Nisan. Right? He wouldn't have made a mistake and said, hey, today's the 5th of Nisan, let's turn it into the 5th of Adar Sheni. That he wouldn't have made that mistake. But it was the 30th of Adar. Since it's the 30th of Adar, maybe he could have thought it's the 30th of Adar. So let's leave it Adar today, and then we'll add another Adar as well. No, you could not do that because the 30th of Adar could be already the 1st of Nisan. And as it being the 1st of Nisan, it would be you wouldn't be able to flip it over to an Adar. Therefore, despite the fact that they hadn't flipped it over to Nisan, it was still prohibited to do so. He thought that since it could be Nisan wasn't enough of a reason to make it into Nisan, and therefore he thought he still had time to be able to add an extra Adar. Realizing his mistake, he davens later and says, oops, I made an error, and everybody brought their Korban Pesach at the wrong time because of me. Tanya Nam Yachi, we have a brisa that supports that as well. Ein ma'avernes hashana b'yom shloshim shel Adar. We're not allowed to, on the 30th day of Adar, that's already past the deadline. 30th of Adar, you're not allowed to add in. Hol v'roi lekovo Nisan, because once we get to the 30th, that's already a day that could be Nisan. It already falls into the prohibition of Achodesh Hazeh Lachem that you're not allowed to add an extra year once you get an extra month to the year once you get to Nisan, and that day is included. Okay, now Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda Omer Mishum Rabbi Shimon Mibnei Shehesi Es Yisrael Asos Pesach Sheni. So the last opinion says the first two answers are about how he made a mistake, how Chizkiyo made a mistake and added an extra month when he wasn't supposed to, either because you're not supposed to push off the Tumah, or because he did it on the wrong day, right? But either way, that leap year was invalid, and that's what the mistake was. This third view is, no. He didn't make a leap year at all. And this is where I said before you were here, right? What he did was, he made what your mistake was from yesterday, right? He said, everybody, you're Tameh, go make a Pesach Sheni.
Wouldn't that be an avera to add an extra month?
That was the question that we've been asking, right? Is it or not? So it depends on who you hold, like Rabbi Shimon or Rabbi Yehuda, right? So it depends.
Right, so you didn't hold that it was an extra month.
He didn't add the extra month.
Right, it was just
they got to the 14th. They got to 14 days. He says, you guys are Tameh. Why don't you bring it Pesach Sheni?
Right.
Okay, so that's what he did. And that was a mistake because that's not for the community to do. So, Hechi Dami. So what was the case? What exactly happened? I mean, how do you make that mistake? Right? You got to look in the Psukim. The Psukim say that Pesach Sheni is for individuals who are Tameh. So the question he should have asked was, is the community Tahor or Tameh?
Right.
And why didn't he ask that question? Either they are or they're not. If the community is Tameh, so then the people who are Tameh can bring right now. If the community was Tahor, so then you're right. Then they've got to get pushed off to Pesach Sheni. And there was no mistake. So what was the mistake?
The opposite. If they're tummy.
If they're
tummy now, yeah. If they're
they're tahor now, if the community is tahor,
now, they can bring up
then they can bring up. Then the people who are tameh can bring the Pesach Sheni.
Oh yeah,
right, because they're individuals.
Right.
Thank you.
No.
Okay, now Hechi Dami. So what were the exact circumstance of the mistake? Amar Ravashi says, "Kigon shahay Yisrael mechza tmei mechza tahorim." What happened was they were half and half, right? Approximately, right? They were approximately half and half. It was unclear which way it would go. V'noshim mashlimos l'torim, but the ladies were all tahor. The ladies were pretty tahor. They weren't worshiping idols, as ladies tend to avoid those kinds of averos. We see this throughout history, that the ladies seem to have a more righteous element to them, and they are avoiding all these idols.
Even tahor when they gave the jewelry to the golden calf.
Well, we're dealing at the time of Chizkiyo, right? So sick in Chizkiyo's time. So in Chizkiyo's time, so they were. The question was, they also eat the Korban Pesach. So if they also eat the Korban Pesach, so let's add them in. Let's add them into the total, right? If you had 50% of the men and 50% of the men are tahor and tameh, and then you had 80% of the ladies are tahor, so you clearly have a community that's tahor.
Would the women, if like let's say my wife was tummy and I was tahor, would the wife wait because it's me who usually brings the korban to? It would be the man who brings the korban.
Yeah, but if she's chayav, so the question is whether she's
or she go to her father's house. How would it work?
So somebody has to bring a korban pesach, and she would have to participate in it, right?
So she doesn't wait for it's not under the okay. Fine.
Okay, so now the odfos alehem, so they added on so that the majority of Jews were now tahor. Meikara Savar, here's what he thought: Noshim barishon chova. He had the question: are ladies obligated to bring a korban pesach? That was the question. He wasn't sure about. Are ladies obligated to, Or is it just that they can participate in it? That's the question. They can, right? If their husband is participating, then here, you take a piece also and you get the mitzvah for participating in Kor Pesach. Or is it that every lady has an obligation to go bring a Korban Pesach? So that's the question that was at hand. So first he thought ladies are obligated. Dahavu miutan tmeim miutan midchu lepesach sheni. So therefore, since the ladies are obligated, you can count the ladies in the general counting of how many people are tahor, how many people are tameh, and you can then realize that most of the people are now tahor, and you can push the minority of people who were tameh out to Pesach Sheni. And that's what he did. Ulavasof savar, and at the end he realized that was a mistake. Women are not obligated. Women get a mitzvah if they do it, but they're not obligated to bring it. Noshim barishon rishus dahavu lahu tmeim ruba. So therefore, since the ladies were permissible, you can't count them when you're determining the nature of the community, whether they're tahor or tameh. They're not obligated, they're only part of the mitzvah if they wish to. Therefore, when determining whether the community is tahor or tameh, you don't count them, right? We'll discuss that when we get to Masechet Pesachim, why that is.
If the community is roiv, if the roiv of the community is tahor, or
we are supposed to, then everybody's supposed to bring it right now. Veruba lo mitchulu Pesach Sheni. Once you have rove of the community tameh, they should not have been pushed to Pesach Sheni. And he did. He pushed them to Pesach Sheni out of a mistaken calculation, and then he had some davening to do.
Was this like a time-bound mitzvah? Because then the women are...
That is the issue, right? Whether women are obligated in being a time-bound mitzvah. Now, when you get to Masechet Pesachim, it's not so simple because women are obligated in eating matzah and other the mitzvahs that have to do with the Seder, right? So the question is, why would a woman be obligated? Why wouldn't she be obligated, right? But we'll wait till we get to Masechet Pesachim for that. Lots of conversation, and we are needing to move on. So Gufa. Back into this conversation. Amar Shmuel says, "Ema Avron is Shana B'Yom Shloshim Shel Adar, Hoel Veroi Lekovo Nisan." Let's talk about this conversation we sort of had in the side here. Whether the 30th day of Adar is too late to add an extra month for the leap year, right? Shmuel had brought this new rule in that said since the 30th day of Adar could be Nisan, even if it's not, could be Nisan. Therefore, it's too late to add an extra month in. So Ibru Amai. What if you did it? You're not supposed to. What if you did? So Amar Ula says, Ein mekachnes a chodesh. So Ula says we're not supposed to be mekadesh the month. Kidshu mai. What if they did? Right? What if they did? So Amar Rava says, Bato ha'ibur. Rava says that this extra you what do you call it? You've invalidated that extra calculation, extra month is not valid. Okay, so I'm sorry, I said it wrong. So Ula says, what happens? So the question is, Ibru Amai, what if they did, in fact, add the extra month? So the answer is, Ein mekachnes achodesh. If you did it, so then you know what you do? You don't set that 30th as the first day of Nisan. Let that 30th day be the 30th day of Adar so that the extra month works, right? Because the bottom line is you're supposed to do it during Adar. Right. So therefore, Ula's recommendation, so Shmuel says this is a day not to do it. But if you did it, what do? Let that 30th day be part of Adar, and that way the new month, the extra month gets added in. That's what Ula says. Then, what if they made? Then comes the next question: is what if they made the next mistake? What if they did go and declare Rosh Chodesh on that 30th day, and now they did both things wrong, right? They added the extra month, and then they made that 30th day Nisan. Now what happens? That's where Rava says, Bato ha'ibur. Now you've invalidated that extra month. Right? Once you've established it to be Nisan, now it's too late. Rav Nachman Amar Meubar u'mekudash. Rav Nachman says, no, it's both work, right? It's actually declared the first day of Nisan, and not only that, but the extra month works. Okay? So Amalei Rava the Rav Nachman. Rava asks Rav Nachman, well, that's astonishing. Michte. Let's take a look at this. What is the essential problem with adding this extra, with doing this? What's the problem with delaying the extra by adding the extra month in too late? The answer is Mipuria lepischa tlas and yomin. The time between Purim and Pesach, there's 30 days, right? Tlas and yomin havu. Mipuria darshina b'chus Pesach. By the time Purim comes and everybody gathers together, everybody's already starting to talk about Pesach. Sorry to say, right? Everybody doesn't want to talk about it. But once Purim comes, everybody starts talking about the halachas of Pesach. Everybody starts learning the halachas of Pesach.
That's scary.
Titania, because we learned in a brisa, Shoalin b'hilchas Pesach kodem lePesach shloshim yom. You're supposed to have a mitzvah to start learning the halachas of Pesach 30 days before the holiday. So now, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer Shtei Shabbosos. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says 2 weeks. Fine. V'chimati reish yarcha merachkin lei asi lezilzule b'chametz. He says once you get to Rosh Chodesh Nisan, okay, you've gotten so close to Pesach that if Beis Din comes out at this point and changes and says, hey, everybody, you've got an extra month, people are going to be like, what? We don't believe you. We're like, why did Beis Din come along and wait this long in order to make this calculation? People are not going to do it properly, and they're going to wind up making Pesach at the wrong time. Right? Too much of a confusion by waiting that long. Therefore, they set that date. So therefore, Rav Nachman, the question is on you. Why is it that if there's a problem here, waiting too long, that now once you've established it to be Rosh Chodesh Nisan, why does that work? How can you add the extra month in? Once you've established Rosh Chodesh Nisan, people are going to be like, well, it's Rosh Chodesh Nisan already. Right? We can't now turn it into Adar. That makes no sense. So how do you solve that problem? Amar le Rav Nachman's answer is, people understand that the way that we establish an extra month is dependent on Beis Din making a calculation, right? That people would understand if they found out that the calculation took this long to calculate. In other words, they're not going to be. What's your argument? It's Rosh Chodesh Nisan, everybody. Great, it's Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Actually not. It's Rosh Chodesh Adar Sheni. Well, what's going on? Is it Nisan? Is it Adar? Oh no, we don't know what to do. We'll have Pesach in the wrong time. No, they won't. People will understand and they recognize how this halacha works, right? You got to Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and people thought it was Rosh Chodesh Nisan, but then they came back a few hours later and they said, no, we want to add an extra month. They understand there was a calculation. The calculation wasn't finished. People won't be confused by that. That's what Rav Nachman says. Okay, so that's their argument.
So that you leave it.
So therefore, Rav Nachman says, right? He's arguing with Rava. Right. Rava says that the calculation does not work, right? But Rav Nachman says that the extra month is added. Amar Rav Yehuda Mar Shmuel. Rav Yehuda says in Shmuel, Ein ma'avrin es hashana ela im kein haisa tekufa chasera rubo shel chodesh. Right? We're not going to, now we're going to need our calendar. This is my sample calendar. I hope it actually, I haven't tried it out reading through the Gemara, I was right? Let's pretend this is Nisan, okay? So Nisan's going to start on a Monday. Couldn't start on a Sunday because Lo Adu Rosh. Rosh Chodesh can't fall out on a Sunday.
What's the reason? Right?
Because we can't have Yom Kippur fall on a Friday or on a Sunday, and we can't have Rosh Hashanah Rabbah fall out on a Shabbos. Okay, so therefore we're going to avoid Rosh Hashanah on Sunday, Wednesday, and Friday. Fine, but we're going to start on Monday. Okay, Rosh Hashanah is going to be on Monday. On Monday, then this year we're going to have Yom Kippur on Wednesday, and then we're going to keep going. And Sukkot is going to start here on the 15th. Okay, Sukkot is the 15th. I put little Sukkot there. Chol Hamoed, this is we're going to be in Eretz Yisrael, right? So there's only one day of Yom Tov. So therefore, Chol Hamoed is going to start at the 16th of Tishrei. Chol Hamoed is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days, and then to the 6th day, right? And then there's Shmini Atzeres on the 22nd. Okay, that's how our Yom Tov is going to fall out. Right. Okay. So now, when is the question is going to be? When is this? When is the season? When is the autumn equinox going to fall out? That's going to be our question here to make an extra month or not. Whether we're supposed to add an extra month. We're taking a look at how far. Now remember that we said it's about September 22nd. So which of these days is going to be the day by which it's the drop dead date, and we say the seasons are out of line. Okay, so that's where our question's going to be.
In Moshe Rabbeinu's time, did they add that extra month? Or
yes.
Okay.
Yep, and even in Moshe was always from the beginning. The second they did the second Adar when they needed to, and yes, they added it all in.
Okay.
Right. So now, Rav Yehuda says in Shmuel, Ein ma'avrin es hashana el imka. I'm going to slow down a little bit just because this Gemara gives me, it's a calculation Gemara, and I don't want to get it wrong. Once you get it wrong, to go backwards is going to be complicated. Okay, so Rav Yehuda says in Shmuel, Ein ma'avrin es hashana el imkin haisa tekufa chasera rubo shel chodesh. So we're not going to make a leap year unless, right, the season is missing from most of the month. Meaning, most of the month goes by and the new season hasn't occurred yet. So v'kama rubo shel chodesh, what is most of the month? Shisha sar yom, 16 days, right? Because the month is 30 days. So if you get to the 16th day and it hasn't, September 22nd is going to be our theoretical autumnal equinox. It could be the 23rd, right? But let's, for the sake of speaking, keep it simple. If the 16th of Tishrei, right? If the 16th of Tishrei comes out before the 22nd, meaning that the previous season goes into the month too far, so that summer, right? If we go back to this, right? We've got the summer goes into September too far, so then we're going to have a problem with the seasons, and therefore that's going to be a year that we should be adding. They should be, meaning the previous Pesach, they should have been making their calculations to prevent this from happening. Okay? So they don't want to have it so that the 22nd comes out after the 16th. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so now, Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, that's what Rabbi Yehuda says. Rabbi Yossi says, Echad ve'esrim yom. You can't have you can't get it to the 21st, right? You have to make sure that the 22nd day of September comes out by the 21st day of Tishrei. Okay? This is the autumnal equinox. Yeah, so you've got calendars there too. Okay? So now, Ushneya mikra echad darshu. What is the difference of position for them? Both of them are learning from the same pasuk. The pasuk says, Chag ha'asif t'kufas hashana. That on Sukkot, Chag ha'asif, right? Now, Rashi explains also that this is the day of the holiday upon which it is permissible to gather crops. That's Chag HaAsif, which is Chol Moed. So you need to have Chol Moed during the new season, right? You need to have, and so now this is the argument. Mar Savar Kulei Chag Ba'ina B'Tkufa Chadasho. One opinion, Rabbi Yehuda holds, that you're going to need to have all of the days of Chol Moed from the 16th all the way through, from the 16th and after, have to be in the new season. So you need to have the 22nd here. Otherwise, that way you can have all the rest of the days of Chol Moed in the new fall season. Okay? Umar Savar Miktas Chag Ba'ina B'Tkufa Chadasha. And Rabbi Yossi says, you don't need all of it, you just need one day of Chol Moed. Therefore, if it falls out here on the 21st, that's the last day of Chol Moed, that's fine. All you need is one day of Chol Moed to fall into the new season, and you're fine. But the issue is that you need to have, at least the Torah is telling us, you need to have one day of Chol Moed Sukkos in the fall. Okay, that makes sense? Okay, now, my Kasavri. Now let's analyze this a little bit further. What are they holding? Ikasavri Yom Tekufa Gomer. What the day of the new season, is that the last day of the previous season, or is it the first day of the next season? Let's clarify that point first. Okay? So if you're going to hold the Tekufa Gomer Belav Hachinami Lo, so if this is the last day of the previous season, then both of them are going to be off. Because if it falls out on the 16th, according to Rabbi Yehuda, you've missed the 16th. That's from the previous season. The 17th would be the first day of the new season if you're going to say that the 16th is the end of the last season. Same thing with Rabbi Yossi. If he says that the day of the change of the season is like the previous is like the previous season, then if it falls on the 21st is the previous season, which means the 22nd is the first day of the new season. That's no good either. So therefore, right? So Laman Damar Kulei Chag Ika, Velo Laman Damar Mitzvahs Chag Ika. The problem is going to be either way, right? Either way you look at it. If according to the opinion that says that you need part of the holiday, you won't have it, because if the day of the new season, of the day of the season, the day of the tkufa is the part of the previous season, and it falls out on the 21st, you won't have any days of Chol Moed in the new season, because the new season will start the next day. Same thing if you hold that you need all of the days of Chol Moed. If you say that it falls out on the 16th, then the 16th is part of the previous season, in which case you won't have all of them. Ella kasavar yom tkufa maschil. Rather, what they are both holding, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi are holding, is that the day of the tkufa, when we say the day of the tkufa, it's the first day of the new season. Okay, that's simple enough. When we say that it has to fall out on the 16th, the reason it has to fall out on the 16th, according to Rabbi Yehuda, is because that's the first day of the new season. The reason why it can fall out on the 21st, because that's the first day of the new season. Good? So far, so good. Okay, now, Meisvei. Now you ask questions. Yom Tkufa Gomer. The day of the Tkufa is the end of the previous season. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says. We have a problem with Rabbi Yehuda. Right? You see what the problem is? Rabbi Yehuda needs to hold, according to the previous brisa, Rabbi Yehuda has to is saying that he needs it to fall out on the 16th. That must mean that the 16th is the beginning of the new season. This brisa comes along and says, no, Rabbi Yehuda is very clear that the Yom Tekufa is the end of the previous season. That's going to be problem number one with Rabbi Yehuda. Okay? Rabbi Yossi says Yom Tekufa Maschil, but Rabbi Yossi says that the Yom Tekufa is the beginning. So Rabbi Yossi we don't have a problem with, right? Rabbi Yossi can say that the Yom Tekufa can fall on the 21st. It's the first day of the new season, and he'll still have 1 day of Chol Moed in his calculation. That'll work. But we have a problem of Rabbi Yehuda. That's problem number one. The furthermore, second problem of Rabbi Yehuda. Tanya, we learned in a brisa. Ein ma'avrin es hashana el imkein haiset tekufa chasera rubo shel chodesh. Right? We're not going to add an extra month unless that the tekufa, unless the season is missing most of the month. Right, as we said, the tekufa is missing most of the month. V'kama rubo shel chodesh, how much is most of the month? Shisha asar yom. Right, that's 16 days in. That's the Tanakama's opinion. Tanakama's opinion says 16 days in. If we're missing it, that's now. Rabbi Yehuda says shtei yodos b'chodesh. Rabbi Yehuda says 2/3. 2/3 of the month. V'kama shtei yodos, in case you need the math help. How much is 2/3? B'chodesh kaf yom, 20 days. That means that Rabbi Yehuda is saying now that the tekufa has to be here. Well, 1 second. Rabbi Yehuda said that you needed to have all of the days of Chol Moed in.
So, right.
Now, how's Rabbi Yehuda now saying the 20th is fine?
Because Rabbi Yehuda includes the 20th as the...
now, if he agreed with Rabbi Yossi, right, then fine, the 21st, he'd at least have the last day in. But it doesn't work because Rabbi Yehuda was the one who said that I needed all of the days of Chol Moed in. So I've got a problem in understanding Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Right? Rabbi Yossi says, Mechashvin Shisha Sar Lifnei HaPesach. So he says, we're going to calculate. If it's 16 days before Pesach, right, Me'avrin, then we're going to add, if the tekufa of the previous, right, March 20th, he says, let's go back to March 20th, right? If the tekufa of March 20th, right, falls out before Pesach, if it falls out before Pesach, that means it's the 14th day of Nisan. Let's pretend this is Nisan for a moment, right? So if the Pesach is going to come on the 15th. So if the Tekufa falls out on the 14th, Lifnei Pesach, Me'avrin, then we're going to add an extra month. Shisha Asar Lifnei Achag, Ein Me'avrin. But if it falls out on the 16th, right, then we're not going to need to add an extra month. Okay?
Well, why can't we just say Rabbi Yehuda or Rabbi Yossi includes the previous season up until the 20th, and then it makes sense.
Wait, say it again.
If Rabbi Yossi,
Are we talking about who we have the contradictions
20th,
with?
right. We said
that was Rabbi Yehuda.
It was Rabbi Yehuda, sorry.
Right.
Rabbi Yehuda says that the tekufa of the includes the 20th. Then the 21st works.
Yeah, except that Rabbi Yehuda held that you needed to have all of the days of Chol Moed in the new tekufa.
Right.
There's no way if it's on the 20th, even if you're going to say the 20th is the last day of the previous tekufa, so the 21st is the first day of the new tekufa, right? You're not going to be able to. What about the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th? He said those needed to be in as well. At least he did in the first brisa that we had. Right. So now we have that's a contradiction. Okay. Sorry, so where was I?
Mixed them up, sorry.
Okay. That's right. We have to make sure we keep everybody separate.
Yeah.
Now, so Rabbi Shimon, so Rabbi Yossi says, Mechashon Shisha Asar Lifnei HaPesach. Just trying to figure out whether we've got to explain this now or whether he's explaining it in a little bit. He's going to tell us that if the tekufa of Nisan falls, March 20th falls before Pesach, then if you do the calculations out further, you're going to wind up, according to Rabbi Yossi, having at least 1 day of Chol Moed in the previous. You're going to have at least 1 day of Chol Moed Sukkos in the previous season. Let's explain it now. In case he does, if we have to, we'll save us an explanation later on. Okay, let's start with what Rabbi Yossi says, that if Shisha Sarifnei, so he says that if you have 16 days before Pesach, well, should I do it as now, or is it spring later? Let me see. Hang on a second. Make sure that we get this, whether we do it now or later, because we're going to ask this question in a second. Yeah, I think it's explained later. If it's not, I'll explain it later. But the bottom line is that if you add up the number of days, right, between the day before Pesach and the, let's say, all right, there's no way to do it, not now. I'll explain it now. If let's talk what happens if 16 days, if I told you I knew I was gonna get stuck. What would happen if the new season of Nisan falls out on the 16th day of Nisan, or on Pesach? If that happens, so let's count up the days. There are 14 days left in Nisan. Added to that Iyar and Sivan are going to be a 29 and 30 day months, 59 days there. Tammuz and Av is another 59 days. That's a total of 132 days. Then Elul is a 29 day month. That brings us up to a total of 161 days. Okay, at 161 days, we are now at Rosh Hashanah. Okay, the difference between, so from the 16th of Nisan until Rosh Hashanah is 161 days. We know that there's 182 days from passing by 2 seasons. How do we know that? Every season is 91 and a quarter. So 91 and 91 and a quarter brings us to 182 and a half days. 182 days between one season and the next. That means that we will have 21 days left in Nisan, in Tishrei, 21 days left in Tishrei. So that means that the new season is going to fall on the 21st. If the new season in Nisan falls out on the 16th day of Nisan, meaning March 20th falls out after the 16th day of Nisan, then if you add all the additions up, you're going to wind up with September 22nd falling out on the 21st day of Tishrei. Okay, does that make sense? Right? So therefore, Rabbi Yossi is suggesting that if it falls out before, right? If it falls out on the 14th, we're going to explain what Rabbi Yossi is going to say, what he means like that. But Rabbi Yossi says again, Mechashvin Shisha Sar Lifnei Pesach. We're going to calculate 16 days before Pesach. Then Me'avrin. Then we're going to, if you're going to wind up with 16 days before Pesach, then we're going to not have enough days, and we're going to have to add an extra month in. We're going to explain how that works. Shisha Sar Lifnei Chag. But if you're 16 days before Sukkos, ein me'avrin. So we're going to explain what that means in a minute also. Then we're not going to. Rabbi Shimon says, Av shisha sofnei chag me'avrin, even 16 days before the holiday, we're going to add an extra month. And achirim omrim, others say miuto, less, as long as there's half a month, and we're going to explain this one too. V'kam miuto arba asar yom, even 14 days. So at least this point, we're going to go through each of these explanations of what each of them are holding, but the point that we were asking our question on Rabbi Yehuda. So at least at this point, we understand Rabbi Yehuda's question. The question of Rabbi Yehuda is, how can you be holding that you need to have all of these days of Chol Moed, if then in another brisa you said the 20th is fine? Second of all, how can you be holding that it can fall on the 16th? That means that you hold that the day of the new season is the first day of the next season, right. But then you clearly hold another brisa that it's the last day of the previous season. So you have two questions on Rabbi Yehuda. So kasha. So we're going to leave that as those are tough questions on Shita of Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, so now let's go into explaining the other opinions here that we had in this brisa. Amar Mar, Rabbi Yehuda said, Shtei yodos b'chodesh, we need 2/3 of the month. Okay, so he's holding here that if the Yom Tekufa, that opinion holds, that if the Yom Tekufa falls on the 20th, that's going to be acceptable. So Rabbi Yossi is going to say, Mechashvin shisha so yom lifnei Pesach me'avrin. So 16 days before, if we calculate 16 days before, so Hainu Rabbi Yehuda. So that is going to come out that it works out exactly the same as Rabbi Yehuda. Why? Because if you start from the 14th, we said if we started at the 16th, we came out with the 22nd being the first day of the new season. Right. If we move 2 days back, so then the 14th of, if we start from the 14th of Nisan, then we add 2 days here. This would be 16 days left of Nisan, which would move back the Yom Tekufa back to the 20th. So we're asking the question. So Hainu Rabbi Yehuda. So then Rabbi Yehuda is saying the exact same thing. The Yom Tekufa, the new season, is falling out on the 20th. Either way, you go. So the answer is, what's the difference between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda? Yom Tekufa Gomer v'Yom Tekufa Maschil Ikabei Naihu. The argument is whether the day that the Tekufa falls is considered the beginning of the next month or not. According to Rabbi Yehuda, right, the 20th, he says the 20th, if the Yom Tekufa falls on the 20th, you still will have 1 day of Chol Moed in. That's why it's acceptable. Now, that means he's holding that the Yom Tekufa is falling on the 20th, which means he holds that it's the end of the previous season. The 21st becomes the first day of the next season. That's why it works. But if the Yom Tekufa were fall on the 21st, so then he would say that doesn't work. But Rabbi Yossi says that no, the new season can fall on the 21st, right? Because the 21st is actually the first day of the next season, and that's why it can work. Okay, so that's the difference between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi's opinion. Amar Mar, next one. Shisha sar lifnei achag ein ma'avrin. So 16 days before the holiday, right? The Tekufas Tammuz. If the Tekufas Tammuz, right? If the summer goes into the next season by 16 days, so then we're not going to add an extra month. El Rabbi Yossi shisha sar lifnei achag hu delo hashiv sar v'timna sar me'abrin. So he says, well, wait a second, Rabbi Yossi, why is it, right? If you're going to start from doing this calculation, why is he saying? Why is he saying, according to this calculation, he's saying that if it comes out that the Yom Tekufa falls out on the 16th, then then we don't need to add an extra year. But according to Rabbi Yossi, he only needs 1 day of Chol Moed in the new season. So therefore, why do you have to worry about it coming out on the 16th? If it comes out on the 17th, the 18th, or the 19th, any of those days would also be acceptable. So therefore, because V'ha'amar, he said, Shisha Shalifnei Pesach, in B'tzur lo. So he says lo. Idi v'idi ein ma'avrin. He's saying no. You're right. If we get to the 17th and 18th, if the day of the first day of the new season is on the 17th or the 18th, so then that isn't going to cause you to make a leap year either. The only reason why they picked the 16th was because they were talking about the 16th before Pesach, right? By Pesach. So if there's 16 days into the month, meaning if there was only 14 days left if there's 16 days, meaning, right, 16 days of Pesach, meaning the 14th of Nisan. So then, the 16 days before Pesach, so then you would need to be able to calculate a new season. Right, but you're right. That's why they picked the number 16. But you're right. 17, 18, 19 would also be acceptable because you'd still have enough. You'd still have another tekufa, another day of Chol Moed in order to put into the new season. Okay, Tananami. We also learned Shisha Sar Lifnei Chag. Right, 16 days before the holiday. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Af Shisha Lifnei Chag me'avrin. So Rabbi Shimon says, even 16 days before the holiday, we are going to add an extra. So Hainu Tanakama, it's the same explanation of the Tanakama, that according to both of these opinions, that you need to have the Tekufa fall on the 16th. So then they're both holding that you need all the days of Chol Moed in. So that means the Tanakama and Rabbi Shimon are agreeing. So what is the point of Rabbi Shimon and the Tanakama saying the exact same thing? Ika beinaihu Yom Tekufa Maska Yom Tekufa Gomer. So the difference of viewpoint is that, and it's unclear, right? Velo Masaimi, and it's not clear which of the two opinions hold what, but one is saying that you need to start the new season on the 16th. One is saying that the season ends on the 15th, and therefore the next day, which is not the end of this, right? The day of the season is the end, or is the day of the season beginning? That's the question. So if it falls out on the 16th, so according to one opinion, that's too late because it's the last day of the previous season. And according to the other opinion, that it needs to fall on the 16th because that's the first day of the new season. I'm sorry I'm being unclear, but I'm trying to be able to make sure I finish within 1 minute. I knew it was happening. Others say this was a hard calculation. So yeah. Correct. I'm wondering whether I'll make my own video at home and repost this to make an explanation, only because I think I'm butchering it. The last opinion says, and usually Acherim is Rabbi Meir's viewpoint, and he says that it is the minority of days, meaning how many is that? Arba Asar Yom has to be 14. My Kasavri, what's he holding? Ikasavri Yom Tekufa Gomer. If he's holding that he says, why does it have to fall on the 14th? If he says that's the last day of the previous season, why does he need the 14th? Right? Everybody was talking about the 16th up until this point. Why does he need to get the 15th in? So the Kule Chag Ba'inon. So he says that this is the last day of the previous season, but he holds that the 15th needs to be in the new season as well. He holds that all of Sukkot, not just everybody else's opinion was only you needed all of Chol Moed Sukkot in the new season. He holds that you actually need the first day of Sukkot in the new season as well. So why? Because he's going to hold. Oh, we're going to explain that in a second.
How many days in the month of Tishrei? It's 29, is it not?
In Tishrei?
Yeah.
There's 30 days in Tishrei, but it doesn't matter. Right, but it doesn't, it's not relevant to the issue because what's relevant to us is only up until Rosh Chodesh, up until Rosh Hashanah, because it's this Tekufa. We just need to be able to get Sukkot in. Once we get to the end of Tishrei, we don't care when that is. Right? Okay. We just need to get Sukkot in. So therefore, v'kulei chag b'inon ha'ikra. So he says, well, wait a second. Even if the end of the Tekufa is on the 14th, you're still going to have the entire Chol Moed in. So Amar of Shmuel Bar Yitzchak Acherim b'Tekufas Nisan kaimi, that the Acherim are talking about Tekufas Nisan. Dechsev, as it says, Shamor Chodesh ha'aviv, that you should guard the month of the spring. Shamor aviv shel Tekufa shehei b'Chodesh Nisan. You have to guard. He's saying that you have to guard the spring so that it falls out in the previous shehei b'Chodesh Nisan. So what he's suggesting is that this idea that you have to be able to have the Tekufa fall at the beginning of Nisan is a separate idea. He's holding that you have to start back at the beginning. HaChodesh HaZelachem means that the first half of Nisan has to be when the new season of the spring starts. That's a new opinion, that the new season in Nisan in the spring has to begin when the first part of the month is. Okay, so you know what? Let's stop here. There's no point in pushing on with this because I don't think I'm explaining well.
Object.
So why don't we stop here? What I'll do is maybe I'll